Hello, and welcome to our first digital program of November. It's great to have you joining us today for one of my favorite topics, marketing. I'm Carolyn Matthews, CMO of the Arcview Group and founder of our newest bubble in our ecosystem, Arcview Marketing Services. Thank you for joining Arcview Access, Make Marketing Moves. So to get started, I wanted to begin by saying thank you to our strategic alliance partners. Our partners have been joining us as experts in the cannabis industry, providing great resources and services to support your success. These include Alpha Root, our seed to sale insurance, Aleaves, cannabis POS made easy, Green Tank Technologies for vape insights and innovations, our data partner, Hoodie Analytics, Hunter Esquire, our executive search and human capital advisory, PayQuick for banking and treasury services, and Waterton Partners for fractional and financial consulting. We greatly appreciate you and your services and are big fans of all that you bring to the table for this industry. So let's jump in today. So everyone has had at least a handful of dates from their life that are too significant to forget. One that will remain forever etched in my mind is March 25th of 2020. 3 weeks after I started here at Arcview, the pandemic was official and we launched the first Arcview Access. As thousands joined us for that episode, just like that, we pivoted and expanded our ability to reach our community. Since then, over 33,000 have participated in our digital programs and continue to feel a need for community building and education, giving everyone this valuable tool for networking, connecting, and most importantly, learning about our industry one corner at a time. With that, a few quick housekeeping items for Arcview Access. Being Trick or Treat Week, hard to believe, but we're already there. We have a few extra treats along the way, so keep tuned in and stay until the end. Our first treat, for those that participate in the polls today and stay with us all the way through, you'll be added to a drawing where you could be randomly selected to win a special gift that will be mailed to your home. Also, another treat, in planning for this event, my panelists and I unanimously agreed that we wanted to make sure when you leave us today that you get something actionable to keep you moving and help your marketing move forward. So for those that will be attending, you'll be armed with a takeaway to keep your momentum going after we close out the program. And hopefully that will help impact your 2023 planning as well. For those new here, this program is being recorded and will be available within a week on our replays page, where you can also find our entire library of programs. The chat will stay open, so feel free to introduce yourself and settle in, connect with new friends and make new friends, or connect with old friends and make some new friends. You can also ask questions, which we will try to answer along the way, or you could also connect with us directly after the program. Since we're always having newcomers to our programs, I'm going to share a quick rundown of the Arcview Group, so all are up to speed about where our ecosystem can serve you best. As I do this quick review, please take a few minutes to complete the poll that you'll see popping up on your screen shortly. Oop, and it's in my way, which will feed into this meaty part of our program today. Many of you know and have been part of the Arcview community since it was started in 2010 by Troy Dayton and Steve D'Angelo. Their mission was to create a first of its kind and much needed safe haven for both investors and entrepreneurs, with social equity at the core. For investors, the goal was to empower them with credible information that they needed to make sound investments in this tumultuous space. Their goal with entrepreneurs was to help them better understand how to prepare and be that sound investment. Flash forward to today, from that solid foundation, an entire ecosystem of services has sprouted, each uniquely positioned to support this budding industry from the ground up. First of those is Arcview Ventures, our principal investing group, managing our unique collective fund made up of 78 members, where those members get to call the shots in their investments. Our Arcview consulting team is your pathway to scaling and building your business no matter the size, handling state expansion down to licensing, valuations, and capital raise readiness. Arcview Events and Experiences, powered by McVeigh Global Meetings and Events, is at the helm of our digital programs like today and bringing the Arcview community back together for in-person events like our amazing event in New York City a couple weeks ago and the upcoming one in Miami in December, with more coming out in 2023. So stay tuned for dates for that. Another gem of Arcview's is WIN, the Arcview Women's Inclusion Network. This network brings together amazing women in this cannabis industry to have them, enable them to have open dialogue and honest conversations, and to have a way to arm women with the tools and connections they need to help them be the best that they can be. Arcview Marketing Services, quite simply, I started this newest bubble in our ecosystem, not only because it perfectly aligns with Arcview being the nexus of the business of cannabis, but most importantly, to be the place where we can meet companies where they're at. Whether you're large or small, pre-launch or mature, we provide a trusted full range of services, branding, website development, lead strategy, CMO to go services to start, where we can become an extension of your team. Lastly, Arcview Capital, the first FINRA approved broker dealer in cannabis, is here to handle your financial raise or investment needs. And also launched earlier this year, if you missed it, Arcview's crowdfunding platform. So stay tuned for more on that. And please visit all of these business units through arcviewgroup.com or the individual URLs that are showing up in the chat right now. So we have a lot to cover today. So let's get shaken with some moves in marketing. So a quote that I felt resonates with our topic today is from Sun Tzu in The Art of War. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. Although daunting, that definitely resonated with how much goes into the necessity for good strategic marketing in anyone's business. So something to noodle on while we get started with our program. It is my honor and pleasure to bring on our panelists today. And as they come on, we do have a varying backgrounds and vast experience coming on and joining us today. And we're throwing a wide net with expertise that anyone owning a company needs to contend with in their marketing strategy and execution. We've got B2B covered, we have B2C covered, cannabis marketing, and outside cannabis marketing and branding. As our panelists take the virtual stage, I'll share a bit about my background. I've been in marketing operations for over 25 years, primarily in the high-tech space, like globetrotting with AT&T and Bell Labs, and then in big data, such as CoreLogic and then Experian, where I created my first patent for an intelligent database. Always attracted by disruptors, I joined the cannabis space in 2019 as a favor to a dear friend to help out for a couple weeks. It was there I fell for the industry and culture and found my new way to serve, pulling together my years of experience to do my part to accelerate change from the outside in. When asked about what my story is and why I'm here, I basically sum it up and say, I came as a favor and I stayed to make a difference. That basically sums up me. Now let's get to the meaty part of our program with our panelists. Now that they're settled on stage, I'm going to have them come and do a speed round of intros with a few bits of their experience, starting with my incredible partner in Arcview Marketing Creative Director, Steve Keltz.
Hey, thank you, Carolyn. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today. So I'm Steve Keltz. Spent most of my career as an executive creative or in executive creative positions at some of the world's largest agencies, working primarily with global brands. I've been also part of building brands and startups and disruptive technology startups. And I really like working with companies who are just starting out and growing something from nothing. And I think that's very exciting. But my experience mostly has been with large global brands, and I bring that perspective to every project that we work on. I'm considering myself a strategist, a creative evangelist, a brand architect. My focus is more on the B2B than the B2C. And my experience spans industries like technology, healthcare, hospitality, finance, entertainment, and global facilities management.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Sure.
Okay, next it's my pleasure to introduce Colleen, an accomplished award-winning marketer who specializes in development strategies and customer behavior, and who recently stepped into an exciting new role. Congrats again on that, Colleen. Please share a bit about yourself.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you, Carolyn and the Arcview team and my fellow panelists. Everyone, good to be here. I'm an OG marketer. I started my career, like Steve, worldwide global agencies in the field of marketing and media strategy. And really, it was there that I learned to align the important facets of data, creative strategy, messaging, and consumer targeting to meet business goals. And regardless of the industry or product, I've worked across a number of industries from finance to manufacturing to tourism and CPG. And these learnings have served me quite well in subsequent roles in both sales and marketing. And I even have a stint, I did 5 years in economic development, which was really interesting to be able to work a little bit in the public sector after having been in the private and nonprofit worlds. I came into cannabis about 6 years ago, primarily on the brand and retail side. I'm currently, I've just accepted a position with Grodan as their North American area marketing manager, where I'm responsible for their cannabis division. Grodan is a leading maker of rock wool substrate and grow media for both commercial vegetable and cannabis indoor and greenhouse grows. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thanks, Colleen. Okay, great. And last but definitely not least, my new friend, David Palashuk, author, speaker, content ninja, and consultant. David, please share a few highlights about your background with the audience.
Hey, everybody. Well, thank you, first of all, for including me in the panel. I'm always thrilled to be part of an Arcview event. I think the platform is just amazing. And again, thanks for including me. My name is David Palashuk. I'm the CEO of Branding Bud Consulting Group. I'm also the author of Branding Bud, The Commercialization of Cannabis, the first book on cannabis branding. I have 11 years in the cannabis industry now, having worked at Dope Magazine and Evergreen Herbal, one of the largest processors here in Washington State, based in Seattle. I've also, prior to coming into the industry, which seems so long ago, I had worked for, almost 25 years at American Express, MasterCard, Pepsi, and Microsoft, working in branding and marketing. So I've taken that, my life lessons and career, and now have applied them to the cannabis space. And I often talk about that as really learning, I had learned about trust marketing when I worked in the credit card industry. And then when I was at Microsoft, at Xbox, and Pepsi, at Mountain Dew, it was really about lifestyle marketing. And cannabis really is both. It's trust marketing and lifestyle marketing coming together. And so I've been able to leverage that experience into the space. And I'm happy to share that knowledge that I've gleaned over the last 11 years with the folks that we're chatting with today and the topics we'll be talking about. Thanks for including me.
Absolutely. Thank you, David and Colleen and Steve. Excited to have everyone together today. So for our program today, what we decided to do is we're going to throw a wide net. There's a great deal to cover in any marketing strategy, as everyone knows and has been part of marketing in the past. So what we're going to be doing is throwing a wide net on an array of topics where the answers could meet you where you're at and hopefully can contribute to your success in 2023 and beyond. From this webinar forward, we'd like to take deep dives into specific aspects of marketing, such as branding and digital marketing, influencer marketing, and the latest tech such as geofencing and retargeting and more. So the intention with this program is to create a really great foundation with a wide net of all that is marketing. And then going forward, we're looking in 2023 to start a series of marketing programs that will enable you to take a deep dive on the different topics that make up this ominous world of marketing. So to get started, we're going to basically do some very specific questions. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to participate. And as we go, feel free to add your questions into the chat and we will try to get to those. as we can, but if not, our emails have been shared in the chat and you can always connect with us directly and continue the conversation. So David, you are up first. So can you speak about creating brands and marketing programs that are meaningful?
Sure. Yeah. Meaningful is a really rich word, right? It's what is meaningful to people is really different. But at the very least, we could say that it's something that's important to people, and and that importance can either be real or perceived, right? So it's kind of funny how we look at things and how we actually tag meaning onto things. Again, whether it's our own personal meanings or universal meanings. But nonetheless, I think the things that are most important with meaningful brands and meaningful marketing programs are really, again, you used the term a few times today already, which is meeting customers where they are, right? And even though it's a somewhat overused term, it really is about bridging that gap and about bringing these things together. So when I think about creating a meaningful brand, I think about really 4 pillars to that. The first thing is really understanding who the consumer is. So that's demographics, psychographics, understanding who they are, understanding how they live their lives, and perhaps what their perspectives on life are. And that would vary. The second thing, and once you kind of get who they are, the most important thing is really what their need state is, what their consumption ritual is. Is it a soccer mom that's consuming and has to consume discreetly? Well, that's one type of consumption and need state. Is it somebody that wakes up in the morning and lights up their bong? That's another. Or is it I could go through the list, right? And it really, what it drives, the next thing is really form factor. And once you understand form factor, right, which really is discrete consumption or indiscrete consumption, and you could break that down into sublingual slips and transdermal patches and lotions and topicals and all of the things that fall into discrete, and then pre-rolls and flour and dabbing and all the other things that fall into non-discrete. But what you do is you end up at somebody's need state and their ritual. And from there, then you could start to overlap finally the brand, and the brand is really that most outer layer. It's the story, but essentially it's the packaging, it's the graphics, it's the logo, it's the copy, it's the font, it's the tone and the message. Again, meeting consumers where they are. And so if you can kind of hit these 4 areas, which are really understanding the consumer, understanding their need state and ritual, which leads into form factor, which leads into dosing, and then finally with the brand archetype, you can really create, if you will, an equation, although it's not that simple, but a roadmap for you to create meaningful products and meaningful marketing programs that support those products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I love your part of your book where you go into all the different archetypes. So archetypes are something that I've studied for a long time. In every industry they apply. They're just a little bit different names or a different tone and feel, but those are really helpful for this industry. So that's a little surprise that we can talk about later, insofar as your book is concerned, but those are really helpful for folks that are in the cannabis space to have a guide and not just wing it. They already exist. And it's a great framework to start understanding who your customer or customers are. Awesome. Okay, Colleen, you're next up. So Colleen, how can marketers ready for 2023 and beyond?
Well, David touched on it a little bit, and that was you mentioning the roadmap. I think the missed opportunity in cannabis specifically that we don't see companies doing right now is committing to a true strategic plan. Mm-hmm. As crazy as that might sound to those of us who have been marketing for a long time, I've seen this prevailing attitude that there is, there's just not enough time to do a plan. Don't lock me into a plan because the marketplace is constantly changing, and I want to be able to sort of shift and jive as I might need to. However, I also find that the default becomes discount promotions and swag, and kind of this catch up, this constant reactionary feeling and exhaustion among marketers and their teams, because there isn't really set out a plan for the year. And I'm not talking about being inflexible, but I am saying we need a strategic plan to place all of the elements and activities that might be going on, including, as David was mentioning, the foundational pieces of your brand and your story and your value to the consumer. It still needs to be wrapped up in a strategic plan. And a strategic plan not only protects you, the marketer, it also protects the business, again, from these additional costs and constant, reactionary state, and never feeling like you're getting ahead and actually moving your marketing along to meet those business goals. So sad but true, but I think one of the first things for 2023 for marketers to do is to have a discussion with your leadership, with your investors. And in some places, you may have to even convince them that you need a strategic plan. Again, I feel like the days of promotional discounting are winding down. And I think as marketers in the cannabis space, it's our responsibility to start to manage both the B2C and B2B activities that we have through the development of a full-on strategic plan. You can chop it up by quarter. You don't have to necessarily be creating execution plans for next December, but let's try to get a plan in there so that you can gauge it against those business goals you've been asked to achieve.
Yeah, I am a big fan of that. And in every industry, it does seem to be the same rule. I'm like, oh, I'll get around to it. There's so much to do. You're just so focused on tactical and execution that you're, to stop and actually think thoroughly about a plan to map it out, and always making sure that it's in alignment with the business goals, because business planning needs to be there first. And then marketing is supposed to be making sure that those happen with the outside world. So, and then coupling that with knowing your customer that David just talked about. If you know your customer well enough that you can name them, like I used to go through an avatar exercise that I would get so detailed on how many kids they had and the kind of cars that they would drive in such detail that I could name them. And so anytime in my marketing plan that I needed to consider a new opportunity to marketing, well, would Sally be in that publication? Would John attend that event? And so it cuts the time out for having to rethink about your customer every single time, because you already have identified them. So it speeds up the process, and you can get to planning and execution a lot faster and more effectively, frankly. Awesome. Okay, great. Thanks, Colleen. Steve, my partner in crime, Arcview Marketing. Steve, tell us about a couple of the universal truths that are mandatory in creating a good, impactful brand, regardless of the industry.
Sure. And I think, we've talked about a lot of these already, and there's some crossover, but universally, there's a difference between being a company and being a brand, right? There's some universal truths about being a company and selling stuff and being a brand. And what does that mean? So if you remember the Matrix, one of the main isms of the Matrix was know thyself. And know thyself is basically knowing what you are and what you're not. You can't be all things to all people. And, if you started a company and you're building a brand, or you have a brand, you don't want to be all things to all people, because you want to be one thing to one group or one target. You want to be really good at that, but you want to know what you are and you want to know what you're not. And knowing what you are and why you do what you do is basically, discovering the purpose behind your brand. Why do you do what you do, and why do you do it? And it's not just about making money and selling stuff. That can't be the purpose. Secondly, it's as we've said here before, know thy customer, right? Know thy customer. Who are you doing this for? And as David said, the more you know about the customer, back in the day, it was called direct marketing, right? The more you knew about your customer, the more you could target you can target a very direct message at that person's, like Sally or whoever your persona is in your business. So again, knowing your customers, knowing their behaviors dictates so much of what you're doing in marketing and what you're doing, where you're marketing your brand and what your brand is and who are you attracting is really based on, who are knowing your customer. And also know thy competitors, right? So number 3, you got to know what you do. You got to know who you do it for. And you also got to know who else is doing it, right? Who else is doing what you do? And I know no one does it like we do, and we're the best at what we do, and nobody's got what we got. But there are people doing it, and there are people in your space, and it's better to know, right? Keep your enemies close, because you should know what people are up to and where they're doing, and maybe you're learning from them and what they do. And we've come across customers that are getting their butts kicked by competitors who are kind of copying what they do and just doing it better, which is infuriating. So you need to have a very healthy awareness of your competitors on a daily basis.
Right.
And then ultimately, once you kind of know who you are and who you're doing it for, I think it's key to have a personality. There are a lot of companies out there that sell stuff and do stuff, but they don't have a personality. And a personality really is a voice, having a voice and not being afraid to have a personality. And I think irreverence, and again, depending on who you're selling to and what you're selling, but I think irreverence and there's so much clutter out there that if I'm always taken back when I see something that's clever, and it surprises me. Like, everything should be clever, right? But it surprises me when things are like, oh wow, like I never thought it could be said that way, or that's such a cool way to be, or that's such a great message. I didn't expect it from this kind of company. And I think, again, it all comes back to talking in a way your customers want to hear and making communications that resonate with them. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, and I'll talk about this later on, but consistency is really important. So whatever you do and whatever you say and however you look, be consistent. Your brand is everywhere online, right? Your brand is in packaging, your brand is in web presence, your brand is in collateral, trade shows, whatever you're doing. The consistency of that is really important, because people ultimately don't know what makes a good brand. They don't know the components of a good brand, but they know it when they see it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's really helpful information. And all of these topics, although they sound very basic, they're so critical. And I think sometimes we just get so caught up in the busyness of getting our plans done, or even just our tactical initiatives complete, that we don't take that time to really do the competitive analysis and do it on a regular basis, because just like we are, everyone else is always moving. And if you're not staying ahead of what your differentiators are, then you're going to be behind the 8 ball. So typically, anytime I go to help a company move forward, I start with the competitive differentiators. How are you different? Because we don't want to come out with platitudes. And we have to get real on what those differentiators are on a regular basis. And that should really be in the forefront of everything that we do. Our key messaging, our strategies, our plans, who our audience is, how do we talk to them? And so I really feel like that is definitely something that I know is kind of a nice to have sometimes. People don't necessarily take the time to either assign someone to do that competitive analysis on a regular basis. I got spoiled in my early days at AT&T as I had a whole team that did competitive analysis and research on a weekly basis. And so to have that level is always nice to have, but it doesn't require that. We can all take the time to do it. It's just a matter of carving out that time in your calendar and doing it on a monthly or quarterly basis and making adjustments as needed. So thanks so much, Steve, for that. Okay, David, you're next and back up. How can you create more customer pull so you can minimize the need for customer push efforts?
Well, when I think of push and pull in the industry, I mean, basically it's the consumer coming into a dispensary, and looking for a product, and the other side of the counter is really the bud tender offering a product, right? So to me, this tug of war is, or this landscape, if you will, sets up for how does a brand not only reach the consumer, but also reach the bud tender. So there's, hey, have you heard about this new brand? Have you heard about this new product? The bud tender says, or the customer walks in the store and says, hey, I've heard about this brand new brand, or this brand, I'm interested. And so to me, that's sort of the B2C, I suppose, tug of war, but there's also a B2B side to that as well, right? The brand selling to the retailer. Yeah. So with that, I really think about that sort of ground zero, but let's even pull back for a quick moment. When I think about transactions, and again, going back to my credit card experience, there's two types of transactions, or rather, I should say there's two types of purchases. One is a transaction. You know what you want it fast. Think of your coffee or think of your gas. You're not interested in learning more about the octane of the gas. You pretty much know what it is, and you want to get your coffee right. But outside of that, you know what you want and you want to be on your way. A shopping experience is something different. That's where you're learning, right? That's where you're exploring. And now think of a cannabis dispensary and the people that go in there. You might have somebody that has a half hour for lunch and knows exactly the pre-roll that they want, and they know they want to get in there, get out of there, have their lunch, smoke their pre-roll, and get back to work in 30 minutes. And if they get stuck behind another customer that is first learning about, cannabis, might even be in the, what's the difference between THC and CBD? And then when they finally look at the counter and they span the form factors from flower to extracts to transdermal patches and lotions to sublingual slips to vape pens to cartridges, I mean, they're lost. And then again, that pulls you down the dosage rabbit hole. So there's so much to talk about in that first conversation or in those first few conversations. And there are different people coming in with different desires. Is this a transaction? I know what I want and I want to be on my way. Or is this a learning experience? So the thing that I always circle back to with my clients is, who's your customers? And where can you meet them in this trajectory of information? And so I often use the pool analogy, and the pool analogy is basically there's a deep end and a shallow end, and there's all sorts of people around the pool, and I all want them to get into the pool with me, but everyone has their own issue. The diver in the family, in my family, my older brother, he's telling me the pool is too shallow to dive into, and I have to show him there's a deep end over there. Or the non-swimmer, I give them a life preserver, or whatever it is. I could make the analogies for everybody around the pool and how I get them into the pool. It's not as cold as you think, or I know you just ate, but you could come in a half hour, right? Whatever it is to coax them into the pool, we have to meet them where they are. And so a perfect example that one of my clients, sort of flipped things around is, they knew that their core competency was music and connections to the music world. Mm-hmm. Now, immediately they thought music and cannabis goes well together. How do we pair them up? Well, if you start to double click on that even further, depending on the music you like, you can start to meet people truly where they are. And so, for example, my client Heavy Grass has a brand which appeals to, well, it's Engager brands. They have multiple brands that appeal to multiple segments, but Heavy Grass is a perfect example. They know where all the people that are into heavy metal go. They know how to speak to them. They, have merch tables there. And while they're not selling cannabis there, they're selling them the lifestyle and everything else, which creates this need or desire for people to go into a dispensary and ask for the Heavy Grass brand. Mm-hmm. So, my advice to folks in the industry that either own brands or are thinking about brands, again, is figure out who your consumer is, determine where they are, determine how to speak to them in the tone that's meaningful to them. And again, they also have another brand which is focused to the EDM community. So again, different community, still lovers of music and cannabis, but you speak differently. And when it just reminds me very much when I was at Microsoft and we launched the Zune music player back in 2006, which was, we had a box, it played music, but it had to appeal to country lovers and jazz lovers and classical lovers. And so we just need to find those hooks that are meaningful. And that's where I think we can start to create the push and pull play in the cannabis space. There's still lots of room to do it, even though there's lots of regulation around it, still lots of opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, there is lots of opportunity, and that's the fun place to play, in that white space. It's like, what hasn't been done, what aren't people doing well, and what can you do better, as another way to really differentiate and really expand your reach, is in that white space. And then something else that you said regarding that customer pull, creating a customer pull instead of push scenario, is brand consistency. So making sure that you are following some type of brand guideline for congruency, regardless of what channel you're talking on or who your audience is. The integrity of your brand is really important, to make sure that that is at least consistent, to create that customer pull that that really kind of helps reduce a little bit of stress if you do it well, so that it's not always this heavy lift of pushing a brand to get people to connect with. The other thing that I found in this industry too, outside of cannabis, it's typically 7 touches to convert is usually the rule of thumb. So whether that's an email, a phone call, a webinar, an article, a social media post, like 7 touches to get people to do something. What I found here is that it takes about 12 to 14. So you kind of just have to be prepared for that up front, because that's just to get them to do one thing. And then, of course, you want to build a relationship and you want to build a following. That takes ongoing nurturing for anyone that you're reaching out to. So some rules of thumb that are important to know too, especially as you're creating that customer pull. You need to build that relationship, and that'll really kind of help take the heavy lifting off. And heavy lifting usually means dollars. So if you create that customer pull well, then you maybe don't have to allocate as big of a budget this quarter, because you're getting momentum in that area and you're getting enough natural traction for people wanting your product. And if they want your brand, they're going to go into the dispensary and ask for it. And if the dispensary doesn't have it, guess whose problem that is? Yes, the brand, but also the dispensary. If they're not able to deliver what the consumer is asking for, they're going to make sure that they get on the ball. So that's also another tidbit. So next, Colleen, if you can rejoin us.
Sure.
Thank you again for participating. If you're just starting out or at a crossroads with your marketing efforts, what do you recommend as the key next steps?
Sure. And as everyone has heard today, those key foundations, those basic foundations of value prop, customer segment, and competitive positioning are so valuable. So start by making sure that you know that and that you own it, that leadership, your peers, both internally and even for your investors as well, that everyone is on the same page. I think that's the first step. Let's review. This is who we say our target is. This is who we believe our brand is speaking to, what our X factor is. Make sure you know that, because no good plan can actually be hatched without understanding and knowing those 3 key elements of your foundation. Next, what you can do with that then is be armed in going into leadership again and saying, okay, I know this about our company and our customer. Now what I want to know are the business goals. So have that really informed conversation with your leadership and get them to commit to you, so that you can hone your marketing plan and programs to mirror that. In cannabis, most of us are straddling both a B2B and a B2C campaign at any given time. We've got to kind of maximize our resources against the distribution and sell-in versus the consumer sell-through and moving the product through. Well, most cannabis companies today really don't have those budgets to stretch that thin. So stand in kind of a position of power with your leadership, knowing what you know about your foundation and how you want to communicate, but make sure that there's great agreement and alignment and conversation happening about, okay, we can't afford to do everything at once. So next 6 months, it's distribution, it's B2B, and I'm going to focus on wholesale materials. I'm going to focus on POP. I'm going to focus on helping our team get us that distribution that we need. Then in the next 6 months, I'm going to pivot and I'm going to start to tell consumers again about my X factor and all those things I already know about us for the consumer's need state. And then hopefully lead them to and funnel them to that distribution so that you can start to see those conversions. Stop down, reevaluate. Do we need to move more toward B2C? Do we need to, are we having old inventory issues? We need to get people excited and find incentives to move inventory. So I think that's it. I mean, backing it up in a nutshell, know your foundations is your key step. If you know those, move forward to conversations with your business leadership about what can marketing do for you, because at the end of the day, marketers can work magic, but we're not magicians. So we need a team, we need support, and we need direction and guidance on where we're setting all of our marketing activity towards.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and related to that, Colleen, I also wanted to touch on a little bit of metrics. So another key element is as part of the strategic marketing plan that we're talking about and that everybody needs as kind of that staple to work from over the course of the year. What kind of metrics do you typically recommend that marketing managers track on a recurring basis? Because that, it's the rubber meets the road right there, is when you have, numbers that, of course, is helping to educate leadership of what works and what doesn't. And the other thing that I found about working with leaders is we need to educate them on that they need to be a little flexible, because marketing, while magic in some ways, it's not an exact formula for any company. So there needs to be leniency in there to test new things, to test messages, to test new platforms and media. So Colleen and even David and Steve, what are your thoughts on tracking metrics? Because that's really such an important part of marketing planning.
I generally set up the metrics after I know my goals. So how will the marketing be evaluated? Is it strictly sales? Sometimes it doesn't get any more diverse than that. Do we have sales? I see a lot of cannabis industry companies today just desperate for that. Well, you can't grow your sales if you can't grow your distribution. So going back to metrics, I think they're customized each time. I know that's kind of a soft answer here, but it's going to be dependent on that long list of those business goals. Yeah, I'm going to think about it for a minute and let my panelists jump in.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, some of the things that I've used in the past is like when I start working with a company, what are the benchmarks? So I can kind of tell if I'm winning. Like, am I succeeding? I might be testing and I might be using other parts of the plan that are absolute, like we've been doing it for a long time and we're going to keep doing it. So you measure from that point up, but especially for those things that you want to test, making sure that you have a solid foundation of what is your current followers on each social media channel. What is the, how many contacts do you have in your database? What does your Google Analytics look like? What is your response on a webinar? So, once you start testing all these things, or the typical things like open rates for emails and all of those baseline things I think are really important for folks to have a baseline understanding. And if you don't have it yet, just take a gauge right now. Take a look at all those basics that do exist. You just have to check your different platforms so that as you put plans in place, that it's really great for you, especially not only leadership if they want to check, but to see what's working and what's not, what's resonating with your audience and what really isn't. Because if there are budget cuts or adjustments, you want to pivot and making sure that your budget spend is directed to those platforms and the communication that is working. Great. Well, we can keep talking about that. That's a really important topic, and we'll keep going with that and weave that in along the way. But I do want to get to our next question, which is directed to my friend Steve, is name a prior experience that you had outside the industry and the lesson it taught you that you now leverage and bring into the Canna marketing efforts.
Okay, it was 2000. And we were in the internet 1.0, if anybody can remember 1.0. I was the CMO of a tech startup, and we were selling basically an online platform to an industry that was doing business completely offline, which most were in 2000. And we had a unique challenge back then, which didn't exist today, which was, is the internet a real thing? And
is it staying around?
is this thing going to stick? Like, are we
just a fad?
Are we going to put our business on this thing? Like, is this like a real thing? Like, and we were literally at trade shows saying, we'll wait until you're at the next year's trade show to see if the internet thing is still around. And we're like, I think it's going to be around. So, but the point of that was that as a startup, and I joined that startup primarily because of my experience in the large branding space, and the investors and the CEO of that firm, they said, we need to look big and we need to have our stuff look professional, and our stuff has to look like Chase or American Express or Apple. Like, we need to act like not a startup. We don't want to look like a startup because no one's going to trust us if we don't look big. And when I say looking big, I'm specifically talking about well-designed materials, and that goes across the board. And I said it earlier about consistency, website, collateral, investing in good-looking design is imperative, because ultimately what I feel is that good design equals trust, right? And you may not know the components of good design, but you know it when you see it. And that's the same thing. You may not know what makes a good brand, but when things look like beautiful and organized, and I see it in the cannabis space, I see, and I do a lot of work with investor decks as well. So for instance, it's the same thing with an investor. They don't want to look at a startup in the cannabis space or company looking for additional funding that doesn't look like they're organized. Their decks are a mess, and you could be a genius, but if your deck is a mess, or your story could be amazing, but if your deck is a mess, your materials are scattered, your communications are not concise, it kind of makes you look like you don't know what you're doing. And that makes people skittish. So I think, it sounds like it's a natural, like, of course, everything should look great. Everything should look like Apple and everybody, but there is a certain trust to good designs. And I would say a recent example of this, there's a company called Athletic Green, for instance, and Athletic Green is somewhat new in the space of probiotics, right? And there are other people in that space, but Athletic Greens is beautifully designed, products, packaging, and they're new in the space, and they've got personality. I think their slogan is "We got your back," which is bacteria, which I love, and it's just so elegantly done. And it's like, you never thought probiotics would be an interesting place to take over and look good, but they do. And I think that brings them to the top. Another brand I think that's doing an interesting job now is Caddis. I don't know if you're familiar with Caddis, but they make readers, and they make very stylish readers for people who wear readers. And, people who don't want to wear readers looking like, grandma and grandpa with that down there, They make very beautiful fashion reads, and their catalogs and their marketing is beautifully done to their core, their core target audience. So I think that, all of us are visual creatures, and I think all of us respond to, in everyday life, we respond to branding, and we're bombarded with branding, right? And marketing, and look in your mailbox, just if you still get mail, but look in your email box, like things that are like not well done definitely make you think that that's not a company I want to do business with. So so my learning back then, and my learning, and I think it's everyone's learning, is invest in looking big. And I don't mean big meaning corporate, it just means invest in looking good.
Yeah, that's a really great rule of thumb. And I think, the old adage of still, it takes only one chance to make that first impression. You only have one chance. And so that means you do need to take your time, even if it's a social post, all the way from, even when you're participating in a chat in a webinar, like every way that you show up makes a difference. And so it is really important. And Steve and I are working on this incredible project, and the incredible work that Steve did. And it's a 40-year-old company, and reinventing it. And it's subtle, using existing culture and look and feel as a baseline, and then evolving it. Really powerful. And we're excited to be launching that at MJ Biz in a couple of weeks. So it is true. It's just, it wasn't a huge shift, but it was significant enough to really reinvent the company in a lot of ways. So sometimes it doesn't even take that much effort to make a big new difference. Okay, great. Well, we're right on time, which is super exciting. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to get some final thoughts from our panelists. And while I do that, if you could complete the next poll that'll be popping up, and don't leave yet, as I promised, there will be a gift at the end that'll be randomly awarded, and you'll be getting an email if you're randomly selected to win this prize, which is I'm a big fan of. And thank you again, David, for providing that for us today. But as we close out, I want to do a round robin of the final question. So between all of us, I'm not going to add up the decades that we've been doing what we've been doing. But we all have done enough to have created some isms along the way, some soapboxes, if you will, some things that you take no matter what the company or what the industry. So it would just be fun to kind of go around and talk about, like, what are those for you now? And I'll start off just to create a baseline of what we're going for here is, so a lot of the lessons, I have to say, came to a head in 2020, like everything else on the planet did. And a couple of the ones that really rose to the top that I think I didn't even realize that I had, but came to smacking me in the head in 2020 to be creative. And the first one really was, and it's kind of a funny one, is leveraging free first. There is so much that any company typically will leave on the table that doesn't cost anything. So whether that's doing a better job at your social media headers, whether that's improving the frequency that you email, there is a lot that is just typically left on the table, and you want to maximize all of that because, again, it doesn't cost you anything. So when you're pivoting or restructuring or evolving, you always want to make sure that you have a good baseline of leveraging the free stuff first, because then everything on top of that is deemed essential in a priority order, that's what you spend your money on. So that was definitely one thing. The next thing was moving innovation and creativity to the forefront. So many of those things, it's like a to-do list. It's on a checklist. I'm going to be creative on Tuesday, or I'm going to invent something new next Thursday. But if you didn't innovate in 2020, you're probably in a totally different place today, or you're starting new, or you were creative and you were able to pivot with the rest of the planet. So putting innovation back to the forefront was definitely a lesson to be aware of that year, and a critical one too. We can't just do that once a year. It needs to be something that we do on a regular basis. And then the last one that really resonated, and I brought it from a prior company, but it resonated here at Arcview because I just joined March 1st of 2020. And so in trying to really understand the value that Arcview brought to the industry, those who educate lead. And so tapping into the leadership and the expertise and the experience that the people in this company have was incredible. And then the circles in which they could reach was even more impressive. And so tapping into that wealth of knowledge, we were able to launch Arcview Access, as I mentioned earlier, and reach a broad brush of people just for helping in an educational way. And so that's really helped, Arcview reach as many people as it does just from an educational standpoint. So those are my isms and soapboxes and things that I will forever keep in my realm in my planning. So Steve or Colleen or David, what do you guys say about your isms?
One that I think that that resonates with me is assumenism. When marketers or companies assume that they know rather than actually check it. I think there's a lot of benefit to confirming those assumptions. I'll give you an example. I was working with Gap and Banana Republic, and they were so thrilled to find out that their customers were highly loyal and committed to the brand. So they decided, well, let's expand that. Banana Republic said, if our customers are coming back 3 times a year, let's give them some more reason. Let's go to an athletic wear line. Let's give them some leisure wear as well, so they have more reasons to come in. Without checking that, they moved forward and had invested a ridiculous amount of money. And they never asked their customers. And of course, the line crashed. And then they came running to the brand strategists and the marketers and said, what can we do? What do you think's happening? Well, we asked the customer. And they said, we like Banana Republic for the work clothes. We buy our work clothes there. That's our work brand. We don't need jogger pants from Banana Republic. So bottom line, don't assume, always just check, because sometimes assumptions are long lasting as well. They worked pre-pandemic, they may not work now. So that's my tidbit.
That's a great one. That's a great one. Yeah, that reminds me of my dad. What he used to say about assuming, but we won't go into breaking that down. Steve and David, what do you think?
If I could just throw something out, I think, Colleen hit it really the best thing, the nail on the head when she said goals, right? What are our goals? Because if we don't know what we're headed for or aiming for or shooting for, we don't know anything. I still joke to this day with my ex-wife. When we got divorced, I said, I'm not only losing a wife, I'm losing my sense of direction. And we still joke about it to this day, but now I never get lost. I just get rerouted with Siri, right? So my point I'm making is I get rerouted because I place the final destination and where I want to go. And I think it's really important to know where you want to go and to set that, because then we can always reroute, we can always close the loop, we can always come back. But if we don't do that, and I'm a victim of this too, I've got so many things on my list every day that I check off, but then I look and say, did that really get me to where I wanted to go? So we shouldn't confuse checking things off our list or doing lots of busy work with getting us where we need to go. And I think just having that mindset to sort of pull up from our desk or our list for a moment and look at the bigger picture is really important. So big picture ism is my ism.
I like that. I'm totally going to use that. Great. Thanks, David and Steve.
That's great. assumerism. I like that one too. I would say, if we're going to go ism here, I would say to me that relying on too much optimism, I think, is a problem. And when I say too much optimism, meaning like you assume and you believe that everyone's going to love what you're putting out there because it's new.
Yeah.
It's because it's free, whatever it is.
Right.
I think companies get to be overly optimistic about their offering without going the other way and looking really hard at making something relevant. And back in the day, we used to have there was a slogan in one of the firms I worked at, was called "We sell or else," and it was about it's not just about you have to kind of really resonate with the customer to make them do something, right? So what I would approach when we approach projects, and I approach every project the same way in any industry, when we're talking about messaging and marketing communications, make me care. I don't care that it's free. I don't care that it's new.
Right. Yep.
I don't care that it's green. I don't care. Like, make me care. And the trick to that is knowing who the me is, because making me care is a different thing to the different me's, right? So again, going back to optimism, you can be optimistic that everyone's going to love what we're saying, but I would say you really need to look about making the consumer care about what you're offering.
Yeah.
And don't be overly optimistic about how great it is, because I'd rather beat it up. I'd rather beat up your message a lot to make sure that it's resonating versus just, I think they'll love it. It'll be great.
Right. Yeah. So many things come to mind with that too. I mean, I used to call that the so what's. Like, so what, because people just want their problem solved. They could care less what it's going to take to solve it or what it's called or what it looks like. They just want their problem solved. And so, once you start unpacking it and really trying to understand, like, what are the so what's about your brand? And sometimes that takes some doing focus groups. And I'm still a big fan of those, although those are a classic, and those are, some additional activities that people don't typically have time to do or carve out the time to do. But it is so important, even if it's just a small petri dish of a cross section of the audience that you're trying to appeal to, because when we're swimming in it, we don't necessarily have the right vantage point to be a good judge on what it takes to move things forward, or things that we should invest in and put into place. So I totally agree. Wow, those are great. I love those kinds of things. So, so thanks for doing a round robin there. Okay, great. Well, I know we're over time, but I hope everyone found this helpful. This will be available in a replay. Thank you to all these incredible panelists. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and showing up today. And then, of course, our viewers, both in our social media, as well as our alliance partners. So as a reminder, since you attended today, keep an eye out for the email that's going to give you that takeaway to help you continue to move your marketing forward, as well as who gets the winner of the new book, actually not a new book, but the Bible, I like to call it, of Branding Bud, which David Palashuk has graciously offered a signed copy of his book. So someone will be randomly selected and the winner will be notified from email. Quick as you go about some upcoming events. Arcview Access, Hiring Highs and Lows is coming next week already, November 10th, coming up on Thanksgiving, hard to believe. And then Arcview Access Cannabis Summit, part 2 is going to be in Coral Gables in Miami in December. Feel free to check out the link for arcviewgroup.com/events to find out more information about that. And then also, as I mentioned, touched on earlier, feel free to swing by booth 10339 at MJ Biz this month. I'll be there with the company Action Pack that I mentioned earlier this call, we've been rebranding this year. So it's going to be a really exciting place to show up, but I'll be there and feel free to stop by. And basically that's a wrap. I hope everyone got value from the program today. Thank you so much for coming. Enjoy your upcoming season and see you next time here on Arcview Access.